Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are getting into a topic that really underlies so much of what we do, or maybe don't do every single day: habits. We're going to pull out the core insights from some great source material excerpts from the book Atomic Habits. Our goal is to understand the science behind how habits work and, crucially, how those tiny, almost insignificant changes can, compound into truly remarkable results over time.
That's exactly right. Our mission today is to, well, make sense of this material and show you exactly why focusing on small, consistent behaviors is often far more effective than, say, chasing big, dramatic changes.
Okay, yeah, let's jump right in. The author opens with a personal story that really sets the stage for this whole idea. He had a pretty severe accident.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
A broken nose, multiple facial fractures, even double vision for weeks. He couldn't drive for 8 months and, get this, had physical therapy just to practice walking in a straight line again.
Wow. It's such a powerful illustration of how rebuilding, whether it's, physical recovery or building something new, isn't typically a single moment of triumph. His recovery wasn't one big breakthrough. It was slow, gradual, built on tiny daily improvements, like just practicing walking.
And what's fascinating is how he applied that exact same principle to building his business and writing this book. He started incredibly small.
Right, with just a habit, wasn't it? Publishing new articles like twice a week.
Exactly, just twice a week.
And that consistency, that tiny habit started to compound. It led to audience growth, first 1,000 email subscribers, then 30,000.
Then 100,000, eventually 200,000.
Yeah, and that wasn't just a number, right? That audience created opportunities, speaking gigs, and, well, the book deal itself. Looking from the outside, sure, it might seem like overnight success, but when you look closer...
It was years.
Years of accumulating these small, consistent actions, day in, day out.
The material highlights a really relatable part of that journey, too. Something called the Valley of Disappointment.
Oh, yeah, that bit really resonated.
You start making changes, you put in the work, but for weeks or maybe months, you just don't see the results. It feels like nothing's happening.
And it's incredibly frustrating.
Totally.
But that feeling is actually, well, it's a natural part of any compounding process. The most powerful outcomes are delayed. You're building pressure, kind of like geological plates shifting underground. But you don't feel or see the earthquake until the very end.
Right, until you hit what the material calls the plateau of latent potential. That's when all that stored effort suddenly breaks through and the results seem to appear like almost overnight.
Yeah, but your work wasn't wasted. It was just accumulating beneath the surface. It's those consistent daily choices, even the really tiny ones, that determine your future trajectory.
Which brings us to one of the central and maybe kind of counterintuitive ideas from the source material.
Which is?
The focus shouldn't be on the results. It should be on the systems.
Don't focus on results. That definitely goes against a lot of conventional wisdom.
Right. We're always taught to set specific goals, lose 20 pounds, write a book by X date, hit some financial target.
And look, goals serve a purpose. They give direction. But the material argues, quite convincingly, I think, that results are actually lagging measures of your habits. They're not leading indicators.
Lagging measures. Explain that a bit more.
Well, think about it. Your financial state is a lagging measure of your money habits, right? Your physical fitness level reflects your eating and exercise habits from the past.
Okay.
Your knowledge level is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Even the clutter in your home. It's a lagging measure of your cleaning habits.
Okay. So the result is simply a reflection of the system. The behaviors you repeat every day. You basically get what you repeat.
Precisely. If you want different results, you need to change the system that produces them, focusing only on the goal without addressing the underlying habits. It's like constantly treating the symptom without ever curing the disease.
And the material points out another issue with being maybe too focused on goals. It can actually restrict your happiness. You're constantly delaying feeling successful or happy until you reach that distant milestone. Once I achieve X, then I'll finally be happy.
Right. It creates this either scenario. You're either successful and happy after hitting the goal, or you're basically failing until you get there. Shifting the focus to the system, the daily process, allows you to find satisfaction and, pride in the daily practice itself, regardless of how far away the ultimate outcome might feel.
So the real power then, the engine of change, it's in those tiny gains compounding over time. Just like the author's recovery or his business growth. Your daily choices are like votes you cast for the type of person you're becoming, the future self you're building.
That daily commitment, however small it seems, is the most significant factor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's dig into the science a bit then. How do these small actions even become habits? What's actually happening in our brains?
Right. So the material breaks down the structure of every single habit into a really clear 4-step pattern: the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward.
Cue, craving, response, reward.
It's a feedback loop. It's how your brain learns and repeats behaviors automatically over time.
Okay, let's walk through those. Step 1.
Step 1 is the cue. This is the trigger. It's the bit of information that signals to your brain that a reward is potentially nearby. Historically, these cues predicted things essential for survival. Food, water, mating opportunities. Pretty basic stuff.
Animal drives.
Exactly. But today, our brains are wired to respond to cues, predicting what we call secondary rewards, things like money, social status, approval, or just personal satisfaction. Your brain is constantly, often totally unconsciously, scanning your environment for these cues.
So the cue is the signal. Hey, something good might happen if you do X.
Yeah, pretty much. And that signal immediately leads to step 2, the craving.
Okay.
This is the motivational force. It's the desire, the urge to change your internal state. Now, the key point here, and this is really interesting, is that the craving isn't just about the reward itself, but the anticipation of the reward.
The wanting, not just the getting.
Exactly. This is where dopamine plays a huge role. We often link dopamine just to pleasure, but it's actually much more about motivation and learning. And it's released most strongly during the anticipation of a potential reward. That anticipation is what drives us to act. High dopamine levels are strongly linked to habit formation and, well, fulfilling basic needs.
So the craving is that internal feeling, the wanting, the needing to act.
Precisely. And the material emphasizes that emotions really drive action. You feel the craving, the emotion or desire, and that precedes the response. We often act first, driven by emotion, and maybe rationalize it later.
Got it. So cue, the trigger. Craving, the internal drive. Then comes the doing part.
All right. Step 3 is the response. This is the actual habit you perform. It can be a physical action like picking up your phone, or even a mental action like thinking a specific thought.
Okay.
But this step requires effort, time, energy. As the material puts it, the reward is always on the other side of some kind of sacrifice, however small.
Okay, so you see the cue, you feel the craving, you do the thing, the response, and then you get.
Step 4, the reward. This is the outcome that satisfies the craving. It provides a feeling of pleasure or relief, and most importantly, it reinforces the loop. It teaches your brain that this action, when triggered by that cue, is worth repeating.
So it closes the loop.
Exactly. The reward closes the feedback loop, completing the habit cycle and making it more likely to occur again in the future.
Cue, craving, response, reward. It sounds so simple, but that loop governs so much of our behavior, doesn't it?
It really does, and the material makes it very clear. If any one of these 4 stages is missing or just insufficient, the behavior won't become a habit, or at least it won't be repeated consistently.
How so?
Well, if the cue isn't noticed, you don't even start. If the craving isn't strong enough, you lack motivation. If the response is too difficult, too much effort, you just won't do it. And if the reward isn't satisfying, well, there's no reason for your brain to remember and repeat the cycle next time. It just won't stick.
Okay, that makes total sense. So if that's the mechanism how habits work, how do we actually use this framework to build good habits and, maybe more importantly for some of us, break bad ones?
Right. That's where the material translates these 4 steps into the 4 laws of behavior change. These are like practical levers you can pull, ways to manipulate each step of that habit loop.
Okay, the 4 laws link to the 4 steps. Let's start with Law 1, which corresponds to the cue. Make it obvious.
Okay. The core problem this law addresses is that as habits become automatic, they become, well, non-conscious. They essentially become invisible. We do things on autopilot.
Right, like driving to work and suddenly realizing you don't remember the last few miles.
Exactly. We miss the cues and even the actions themselves. This lack of self-awareness about our habits is a huge barrier to changing them. The material uses a great quote from Carl Jung.
Oh, yeah.
Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Wow, that's powerful. It's easy to feel like you're just unlucky when really you're just running on these hidden programs.
Totally. So how do we become more aware? How do we make the unconscious conscious?
Good question.
Well, one solution is simply to increase awareness. The material gives the example of the Japanese railway system's pointing and calling method.
Pointing and calling.
Yeah, workers physically point at signals and call out their status. Signal is green. It forces them out of autopilot and makes the non-conscious action conscious.
Okay, that's interesting for a system, but for personal habits.
For personal habits, the source suggests the habit scorecard. It's a simple exercise. Just list out your daily habits from the moment you wake up. No judgment, just list them.
Like wake up, check phone, brush teeth, make coffee.
Exactly. It helps you see what you're actually doing and helps you start to identify the cues that trigger those behaviors. It brings them into the light.
So forced awareness or simple tracking can reveal the hidden system. What's another way to make the cue obvious, especially for the good habits we want to build?
Solution 2 is to design your environment. This is huge. Behavior isn't just about your personality or willpower, it's heavily influenced by your surroundings. The material cites Kurt Lewin's equation. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment. B equals FPE.
Right. We're constantly being shaped by the world around us. Every habit depends on its context.
Absolutely. Our environment is like a silent architect of our behavior.
So how do we use that?
The key application here is to make the cues for your good habits really obvious in your environment. Think about common examples. Why do people grab a certain brand of soda or coffee? Often, it's simply the most obvious, readily available option.
It's right there at eye level, or the shop is on the corner you always pass.
Exactly. So you want to make the best choice, the most obvious choice for you.
Like putting the apple bowl on the counter instead of hidden in the fridge and maybe hiding the cookies in the back of the pantry.
Precisely. You can strategically place triggers for the habits you want throughout your space. Put your running shoes by the door, leave your vitamins next to the coffee maker. The material also points out something interesting. It's often easier to build new habits in a new environment.
Why is that?
Because you're not constantly fighting against the old cues embedded in your familiar surroundings. You don't have those established triggers pulling you back to old routines.
But we can't always just move houses when we want to start flossing.
True. So if you can't change environments, you can redesign or rearrange your current one. Create separate zones for different activities. The one space, one use concept.
Like having a dedicated reading chair or a specific desk just for work, rather than trying to do everything from the couch or the kitchen table.
Exactly. The author mentions his own experience struggling to stop working when his workspace was also his living space. Getting a small office created a clear physical boundary, a distinct context just for work mode. Avoid mixing the contexts of different habits where possible. Don't eat at your desk if you can help it. Don't scroll social media in bed if you want to sleep better.
Okay, that makes sense. Separate the triggers.
Yeah.
So that covers making good habits obvious. What about using this law to break the bad ones?
Solution 3 follows logically. Avoid bad habits by making cues invisible.
Get rid of the trigger.
Yeah, the material strongly argues that constantly relying on willpower to resist temptation is, frankly, an ineffective long-term strategy. It's just mentally exhausting. If the cues for your bad habits are everywhere, the junk food is visible, the TV remote is handy, the notification pops up, you're constantly battling your environment.
So remove the cue entirely. Don't even let the battle start.
Cut it off at the source whenever possible. The example from the material about J.P. Patterson and the cash register is perfect for this.
Remind me.
His employees were apparently stealing from the till. Instead of just trying to police their honesty or demanding more willpower, he introduced a cash register that locked the cash drawer automatically and issued a receipt for every transaction.
So it didn't require the employees to exert self-control.
Nope. It simply made the cue for theft, easy access to cash, basically invisible, and the act itself impractical or almost impossible. System change, not willpower demand.
That's a great illustration of a systemic solution winning over a willpower one. Make the bad habit cues invisible or make the response incredibly difficult.
Exactly.
All right, law 1, make it obvious for the cue. Let's move to law 2, which is tied to the craving. Make it attractive.
Okay. So at a fundamental level, humans are highly social creatures, right? We have this deep evolutionary drive to fit in, to bond with others, to gain approval. This inclination was absolutely critical for survival back in our tribal days.
Belonging meant safety.
Absolutely. And the material highlights that because of this, we are inherently wired to imitate the habits of 3 key groups.
Let me guess. The close, the majority, and the powerful.
You got it. We imitate the habits of the close, our family and friends. If your close circle has a certain habit, good or bad, you're far more likely to adopt it yourself. Peer pressure is real, both positive and negative.
Makes sense.
We also imitate the majority, the dominant behavior of our tribe or culture. Social norms are incredibly attractive. We tend to get swept along by the customs and expectations around us. If everyone in your office eats lunch at their desk, you probably will too.
Hmm.
And finally, we imitate the powerful people we look up to, people with status, people whose approval we desire. We are attracted to behaviors that seem to earn respect, status, or admiration.
Like seeing a successful person with a certain morning routine and wanting to copy it.
Exactly. The example of the Polgar sisters becoming chess prodigies is relevant here. It wasn't just about innate talent, though they had it. It was about their parents creating an environment and a family culture where chess obsession was the absolute norm and highly valued. It made the habit incredibly attractive within their immediate tribe.
So aligning your desired habit with the behavior of a group you admire, or joining a group where that habit is the norm, makes it inherently more attractive.
It's powerful social proof. We want to belong, and adopting the group's habits is a key way we signal that belonging.
Okay, what else makes a craving attractive? The material mentioned supernormal stimuli.
Ah, yes, like exaggerated cues.
Right.
Exactly. These are cues that are sort of heightened versions of natural triggers, and they elicit a stronger than normal response. The classic examples are from animal behavior studies, like birds being more attracted to larger, brighter dummy eggs or feeding cues than the real, natural ones.
Okay, how does that apply to us?
Well, our modern world is absolutely full of these. Think about the food industry. They expertly engineer processed foods with optimized levels of salt, sugar, fat, and specific textures. They talk about aura sensation and dynamic contrast.
Sounds fancy.
It just means how food feels in your mouth and how the sensations change as you eat it. They design these foods to create incredibly attractive, almost addictive experiences. They exploit our ancient instincts for calorie-dense foods, but push them way beyond their original evolutionary purpose.
They create these supernormal stimuli for food, driving intense cravings that are hard to resist.
Precisely. And understanding this helps us see why some modern habits are so incredibly hard to resist. They're literally designed to be hyper-attractive to our primal brains.
Okay, so we need to be aware of these supernormal stimuli. Can we actively make a habit more attractive ourselves?
Yes, the material also suggests you can make it attractive by reframing your mindset, basically changing how you think about a habit or the cues associated with it.
Intentionally changing your perspective. How does that work?
Well, the example of Alan Carr's approach to smoking is a good one. His method heavily involves reframing the cues associated with smoking, seeing them not as triggers for pleasure or relief, but as signs of addiction or things that cause harm. It changes the association.
So you change the story you tell yourself about the cue.
Exactly. Or think about reframing frustrating situations. Say you get interrupted during meditation. Instead of seeing it as an annoyance, you could reframe it as a valuable opportunity to practice noticing distraction and gently returning to your breath. The interruption cue now triggers the desired response practice.
Or reframing nervousness before a presentation.
Right. Instead of thinking, oh no, I'm so nervous, reframe it as, okay, I'm feeling excited, my body is getting ready to perform. You leverage the physical symptoms, the racing heart, the adrenaline, to aid concentration instead of letting them become a source of anxiety.
That's clever. Taking the existing cue and consciously associating it with a different, more positive or useful interpretation.
It changes the emotional feeling, the attractiveness associated with the habit before you even get to the response part.
Okay, law 1, make it obvious.
Yeah.
Cue. Law 2, make it attractive. Craving. Now law 3, which is about the response, make it easy.
Yes. And this one taps into a really fundamental principle, the law of least effort. Humans, like water flowing downhill, naturally gravitate towards the path of least resistance. Our brains are wired for efficiency, for conserving energy.
We're lazy.
Maybe efficiently lazy. The strategy derived from this is simple. Make good habits as easy as possible and make bad habits as difficult as possible.
Reduce the friction for the good stuff. Increase the friction for the bad stuff.
You got it. A related concept the material explores here is the difference between being in action versus being in motion.
Action versus motion.
Yeah, motion is activity that feels productive: planning, strategizing, learning, organizing your notes, reading articles about what you want to do. Action is the behavior that actually produces a result: writing the chapter, making the sales call, doing the workout.
And we often get stuck in motion, don't we? Feel safer.
Totally. Motion allows us to feel busy and productive without the risk of failure or criticism that comes with taking actual action. But motion alone never produces the outcome. We need to cross the threshold into action.
So to make action more likely, we focus on reducing the effort required for it.
Yes. Decrease friction. Reduce the number of steps or the amount of physical or mental effort needed to perform the desired habit. The material brings up the example of Japanese manufacturing in the 70s, really focusing on eliminating wasted motion, making production incredibly efficient.
Less work, less wasted energy means it's more likely to get done consistently.
Businesses understand this intuitively. They succeed by reducing friction for their customers. Think about it. Meal delivery apps reduce the friction of cooking.
Dating apps reduce the friction of meeting people.
Netflix autoplay reduces the friction of just watching one more episode.
Oh yeah, that's a killer feature for binge watching.
Right. Even governments sometimes automate things like retirement savings contributions or prescription refills to make the desired behavior the default, the low-friction option. Making the right behavior easy frees up energy and willpower for other things.
Makes perfect sense. If it's easy, you're just way more likely to do it.
And conversely, you can deliberately increase friction to make bad habits harder. This is the flip side of that Patterson cash register story. Making the unwanted behavior require significant effort or inconvenience. Unplug the TV after use and put the remote in another room. Delete distracting apps from your phone.
Make it a hassle. What about preparing ahead of time? Does that fit here?
Absolutely. A very effective tactic is to prime the environment. Arrange your surroundings beforehand to make the next action, the desired action, easier.
Like laying out your workout clothes the night before.
Exactly. Or packing a healthy lunch. The material shares the story of Oswald Knuckles, who has this habit of resetting the room. When he's done watching TV, he puts the remote away, arranges the pillows, folds the blanket. When he leaves his car, he throws away any trash.
So he's not just cleaning up.
No, he's deliberately preparing the environment to make the next time he enters that space more conducive to order and good habits. He's making it easy for his future self.
Preparing the way for future self's good choices. I like that.
And this connects nicely to the concept of decisive moments. Small choices often function like forks in the road, dramatically shaping the options available to your future self down the line.
How so?
Well, the single decision of whether to go straight to the gym after work or go home first sets the stage for the rest of your evening. Once you're home on the couch, the friction to get back out is much higher.
Right. Or the moment you decide whether to start cooking dinner versus just ordering takeout, that one choice limits what you'll be eating and doing for the next hour or two.
Exactly. Your options become constrained by the path your initial habit takes you down. If you chose the Italian place for dinner, pizza is suddenly an easy option, but sushi probably isn't. Mastering these small initial choices is crucial.
Okay, so decrease friction, increase friction, prime the environment, be mindful of decisive moments. What about just getting started when a new habit feels too big or, daunting?
That's where the 2-minute rule comes in. It's brilliant in its simplicity. When you start a new habit, the rule is that it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
Less than 2 minutes. That sounds too easy.
Well, the point isn't necessarily to do the entire habit in 2 minutes. It's about making the start of the habit incredibly easy, the initiation.
So instead of read for an hour, it's read 1 page.
Exactly. Or instead of run 3 miles, it's put on my running shoes. Instead of do yoga for 30 minutes, it's take out my yoga mat.
That's like a gateway habit.
That's a perfect way to put it. The goal is to make starting so effortless that you can't use the excuse, I don't have time, or it's too much work. Once you've actually initiated the positive behavior, even for just 2 minutes, continuing is often much easier than starting from a complete standstill.
And doing something, even small, is always better than doing nothing.
Always. It reinforces the identity, it keeps the momentum going.
And once that tiny 2-minute start becomes consistent,
then you can use habit shaping. You gradually scale up the scope or duration of the habit over time. Maybe you read 1 page for a week, then 3 pages, then 5 minutes, then 10. But you always make sure you can consistently master the first 2 minutes at each new stage. The materials advice here is key. Standardize before you optimize. Get the habit established. Make it consistent, however small, before you worry about making it perfect or bigger.
Standardize before you optimize. Build the foundation first.
Yeah.
Okay, that's law 3. Make it easy. Response. So finally, law 4, for the reward step, make it satisfying.
Right. And this comes back to a basic truth. We are fundamentally more likely to repeat a behavior if the experience is satisfying. If it feels good, we want to do it again.
Seems obvious, but...
The challenge this law addresses is the problem of delayed gratification.
Ah, yes. The classic conflict between present me who wants the donut and future me who wants to be healthy.
Exactly. Our ancient brain, our Paleolithic brain, evolved in an immediate return environment. Our ancestors got pretty instant feedback and rewards, finding food, securing shelter, escaping a predator. Success or failure was usually immediate.
But our modern society is largely a delayed return environment, isn't it?
Hugely. Think about getting a paycheck weeks after doing the work, seeing fitness results months after starting exercise, or benefiting from retirement savings decades from now.
The rewards for many of the most beneficial long-term habits are way off in the future.
Exactly. But compounding works in both directions. The consequences of bad habits, like smoking or overeating or excessive spending, are often delayed. But the rewards from those bad habits, the nicotine hit, the tasty food, the thrill of the purchase, those are usually immediate.
And instant gratification is a powerful force.
It usually wins in a head-to-head battle with delayed gratification for present you. Our brains are just wired that way.
So how do we fight that? How do we give those beneficial long-term habits some immediate satisfaction to compete?
Solution 1. Make good habits immediately satisfying. You need to find a way to add a little bit of immediate pleasure or a tangible reward right after completing the desired habit.
Like giving yourself a gold star.
It could be that simple. Or the example from the material of the couple saving for a trip to Europe. Whenever they skipped eating out, which was their desired behavior change, they would immediately transfer $50 into a special vacation savings account they labeled Trip to Europe.
Ah, so they made the act of not doing the bad habit and doing the good one, saving money, immediately rewarding and visible.
Yes. They created an immediate positive feeling. Look, our vacation fund grew, tied directly to the desired behavior. It bridged the gap until the bigger reward of the trip.
That's smart.
It's important, though, that this immediate reward reinforces your desired identity, not conflicts with it. Rewarding a workout with a healthy smoothie aligns with being healthy. Rewarding it with a giant ice cream sundae maybe sends a mixed message if your goal is weight loss.
Good point. Align the reward with the identity.
Ideally, the intrinsic rewards, feeling more energetic, sleeping better, having a clearer mind, will eventually become satisfying enough on their own. But these immediate, perhaps artificial rewards help bridge that gap, especially in the early stages when the intrinsic benefits aren't obvious yet.
Okay, add immediate satisfaction to good habits. What about the flip side? Making bad habits less likely by making them unsatisfying.
Right. Solution 2, make bad habits immediately unsatisfying or painful. You need to create some kind of immediate cost or consequence for doing the unwanted behavior, or perhaps for failing to do the desired one.
This sounds like where accountability comes in, right? Having someone check up on you.
Absolutely. Accountability partners and habit contracts are very effective tools here. The material gives this extreme, purely illustrative idea from negotiation expert Roger Fisher about having the nuclear launch codes embedded in a volunteer's chest.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, the idea being the president would have to literally kill someone to start a war, an immediate, visceral, painful consequence. It's hypothetical, obviously, but it shows the power of immediate, certain pain for failure.
Okay, maybe a more practical example.
Oh, yes. A more practical one is the athlete who created a contract with his trainer and his wife. It included immediate financial penalties like $100 if he didn't log his food, $500 if he missed a weekly weigh-in target.
Ouch.
And even embarrassing consequences like having to wear the hat of a rival football team if he skipped his sprints.
That would hurt. So knowing someone is watching, or that there's an immediate, agreed-upon cost, creates instant negative feedback.
Right. Breaking a promise to someone else or facing an immediate, tangible consequence feels much more painful in the moment than the distant, abstract health cost of skipping a workout or eating junk food.
Makes sense.
The material even mentions people automating this stuff, like setting up a service that automatically tweets something embarrassing or sends money to an organization you dislike if you don't check into the gym via GPS by a certain time.
Wow, using technology to add immediate friction and pain. That's intense.
It can be. Another tactic related to satisfaction, maybe less intense, is habit tracking.
Like marking an X on a calendar.
Exactly. Simply marking off a day on a calendar or checking a box in an app after completing a habit provides an immediate visual reward. I did it. Seeing the streak build feels satisfying in itself and motivates you not to break the chain.
Don't break the chain. Jerry Seinfeld's method.
Right, that's the one. Tracking keeps your focus on the process, on showing up each day, and that process itself becomes rewarding.
Okay, so Law 4. Make it satisfying. Add immediate pleasure to good habits. Add immediate pain or cost to bad ones. And use tracking for that visual reward of progress.
And just one final thought from the material on satisfaction. It's deeply tied to our expectations. Satisfaction isn't absolute, it's relative.
How so?
It can be thought of as what you like or achieve minus what you want or expect. If your wants and expectations constantly outpace what you like or what you actually achieve, you'll be perpetually unsatisfied, even if you're making progress.
Like the author's experience with his email signups, right? Getting the 1,000 a day went from being this amazing celebration to just the new normal because his expectations shifted.
Exactly. And the flip side is true, too. The pain we feel from failure is often directly proportional to the height of our prior expectations. Managing expectations is also part of making the journey satisfying. There's a quote from Seneca in there. Being poor is not having too little, it is wanting more.
And Viktor Frankl's point that happiness isn't something you pursue directly, but it ensues from meaningful action.
Right. Desire drives us, but satisfaction follows the completion of the action, not just the wanting itself.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground. The foundational habit loop. Cue, craving, response, reward. And then the 4 laws to hack that loop. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
Yeah, applying those laws to both build good habits and break bad ones.
The material also includes some deeper insights or maybe advanced concepts, right? Beyond the basic laws.
It does. One important one is about choosing the right field. It touches on genetics.
Oh. Does it say genes are destiny?
No, not destiny, but they do influence our areas of opportunity. It's just significantly easier to build habits, master skills, and find satisfaction when they align reasonably well with your natural inclinations and strengths.
Play to your strengths.
Basically, yeah. The advice is to try and find a game where the odds are already slightly in your favor because of your natural abilities. Or even create your own game. Genes don't eliminate the need for hard work, but they can clarify what is likely to be the most fruitful area to apply that hard work.
Makes sense. Makes the habit feel more natural, less like a constant uphill battle if it aligns with who you are.
Right. Another concept is the Goldilocks rule.
Not too hard, not too easy, just right.
Exactly. Peak motivation and performance, the kind you see in flow states, often occur when you're working on tasks that are of just manageable difficulty. They're challenging, but not overwhelming. The sweet spot is estimated to be roughly 4% beyond your current ability.
Challenged, but still within reach. That's where you feel engaged and make progress.
Precisely. But then the material delivers a pretty stark truth about mastery, even when you find that sweet spot.
Uh-oh. What's that?
The greatest threat to long-term success isn't usually failure, it's boredom.
Boredom.
Yeah. Doing the same thing over and over, even if it's effective, even if it's part of that Goldilocks zone practice, eventually gets monotonous. The initial excitement inevitably fades.
I can see that. Practice isn't always thrilling.
It rarely is long-term. The quote from the athlete's coach in the material is memorable. He said something like, "The difference between the top performers and everyone else isn't necessarily who works hard when they feel motivated.
It's who can handle the boredom."
It's who can handle the boredom of practicing the fundamentals every single day, day in, day out. Professionals stick to the schedule even when it's boring, annoying, or painful. Amateurs let their mood dictate their actions. The material says you have to find a way to fall in love with boredom.
Wow. Fall in love with boredom. That's a tough one, but probably incredibly realistic.
It really is. Consistency trumps intensity over the long haul, and consistency requires navigating boredom.
Okay.
The material also touches on continuous improvement. Automatic habits are essential. They free up mental energy, but they aren't sufficient for achieving true mastery in a field.
You need more than just autopilot.
Right. You need that base layer of consistent automatic habits plus ongoing deliberate practice. You need to keep actively pushing yourself slightly beyond your current edge, constantly applying that Goldilocks rule to keep getting better. You can't just coast once the habit is formed if you want to reach higher levels.
So build a consistent foundation with habits, then actively seek out ways to refine and challenge yourself within that structure.
Exactly. And related to that, there's a point about identity evolution. We talked about how repeating a habit builds evidence for a desired identity. I'm a writer because I write every day. That's powerful. But the material warns that this very identity can sometimes become pride that actually hinders further growth. You might start denying weaknesses or avoiding new challenges because they conflict with your established self-image as someone who's already good at this.
Your identity becomes rigid.
Right. To reach the next level, you might need to be willing to question, break down, and evolve beliefs about yourself that are holding you back, even if those beliefs were helpful in getting you where you are now.
Be willing to let go of who you were to become who you could be. That's deep.
It is. And then there's a very direct, maybe blunt point the material makes.
Lay it on me.
Actions speak louder than words or intentions. If you say being healthy is a priority, but your actions consistently prioritize convenience over healthy choices, then your actions reveal your true priorities, regardless of what you tell yourself or others.
Oof, that's a reality check we probably all need sometimes. Your behavior shows what you really value in the moment.
Your actions are the most honest signal of what you actually want, or at least what you're willing to work for.
Got it. Anything else stand out?
Just one more point about why relying purely on willpower is tough. The material explains that self-control isn't satisfying.
How so?
Well, resisting a craving through sheer willpower doesn't actually resolve the underlying desire. It just suppresses it or ignores it. A reward satisfies a craving, closing the loop. Willpower requires you to constantly release or fight against a desire rather than fulfilling it.
And that lack of fulfillment, that constant battle.
Makes self-control feel inherently unsatisfying and incredibly difficult to maintain long-term. It burns energy without providing a rewarding payoff in the brain's habit circuitry.
Which explains why just gritting your teeth and saying, I'll stop doing X, without changing the underlying system, the cues, the attractiveness, the ease, the satisfaction, rarely works for long.
Exactly. It's fighting against the core wiring of the habit loop instead of working with it.
Okay, so pulling this all together, we've taken a really deep dive into the foundational science of habits that cue, craving, response, reward loop. And then the practical levers provided by the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
Yeah, applying those to both good habits and bad ones.
We've explored how our environment and social groups shape us, the challenge of delayed gratification versus our brain's love for instant rewards, the incredible power of tiny changes compounding over time.
And even the often overlooked but critical role of boredom in the path to mastery.
The key takeaway seems to be understanding these fundamental principles and then, intentionally designing your environment, your approach, and maybe even your mindset to make good habits the path of least resistance and greatest satisfaction.
While making the bad ones difficult, unattractive, invisible, and unsatisfying, small, consistent actions really are the building blocks for significant transformation over time. It's not about massive upheaval, usually.
Right. Okay, so here's maybe a provocative thought for you, the listener, to sit with after all this. Consider that instant gratification bias we talked about, that powerful pull towards immediate rewards that's rooted deep in our ancient brain wiring. How might that biological default setting be subtly influencing your daily decisions and your long-term path, maybe in ways you haven't fully recognized before?
Yeah, that's a good one. And building on what we've discussed, what's maybe one small, immediate reward you could consciously add to a beneficial long-term habit today? Something to help present you work with your brain's wiring instead of constantly fighting against it.
Or conversely, what tiny piece of friction could you introduce right now for a bad habit you want to curb? Just make it a little bit less easy, a little less obvious starting today.
It's about those small tweaks aligned with these laws.
Definitely. Maybe take some time to reflect on your own habits using the lens of these 4 steps and 4 laws. You can try that simple habit scorecard exercise the material mentioned, or look for just one opportunity today to apply the 2-minute rule to get started on something. Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.